I've spent my entire life building something that was supposed to last beyond me. A business that carried not just my name, but my sweat, my discipline, my values. Every brick, every dollar, every sleepless night, it was mine. I never built it for myself. No, I built it for the family. For my son. At least, that's what I told myself for decades. I started from nothing. People throw that phrase around lightly, but in my case, it was true. No inheritance. No handouts. Just a pair of calloused hands, an iron will, and the ability to work harder than the next man. Back then, when I was younger, I promised myself two things. I would never let my family go hungry. I would leave behind something my son could be proud of. For years, that promise drove me. Through the late nights at the office, the double shifts when payroll was tight, the mornings when exhaustion weighed heavier than steel. And you know what? I made it. The business started small, barely more than a warehouse and a truck. I remember nights when my wife would drive the truck while I unloaded, both of us laughing in the cold just to stay awake. We built it up year by year. We hired workers, expanded into new markets. Soon, people in town spoke my name with a kind of respect I never thought I'd earn. By the time my son was born, the company wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. I used to cradle him in my arms and whisper, "One day, all this will be yours." I meant it, with every fiber of my being. But let me tell you something about sacrifice. When you bleed for something, you expect others to understand the cost of it. My son, he grew up surrounded by the comfort I never had. Private schools, vacations, a big house filled with warmth. I told myself that was a good thing. What father doesn't want his son to have more than he did? But here's the cruel irony. The more I gave him, the less he seemed to value it. I remember one of our first arguments about the business. He was maybe 21, fresh out of college, full of ideas and arrogance. He stormed into my office one morning, slamming a folder down on the desk. "Dad, you're doing this all wrong. We're leaving money on the table. We need to go digital, streamline, modernize everything." I looked up at him calm, because I'd been hearing versions of that speech from outsiders for years. "Son, we didn't build this on shortcuts and buzzwords. We built it on trust, on relationships. You don't just erase that overnight." He rolled his eyes. "That's old man talk. The world doesn't work like that anymore. You're stuck in the past." The word past hit me harder than I let him see, because what he called past was my life's work. Still, I bit my tongue. He was young, hot-headed. I thought he'll learn. But instead of learning, he started resenting. Every family dinner turned into a debate. Every company meeting with him present became a battlefield. "You're too cautious," he'd snap. "And you're too reckless," I'd counter. He wanted fast money, fast growth, shiny numbers to flaunt. I wanted stability, loyalty, and sustainability. The clash was inevitable. But let me be clear, back then, I never doubted his loyalty to me. Yes, we argued. Yes, he was brash. But betrayal? That word never crossed my mind. Because this was my son, my flesh and blood. And I believed, foolishly, that blood always came before greed. There was this moment, seared in my memory, when I tried to bridge the gap. He was 25 then, already working with me full-time. We were sitting in the office late, the rest of the staff gone. Papers piled high, numbers flashing on the screen. I leaned back, rubbed my eyes, and said quietly, "Son, you know why I'm hard on you?" He didn't look up from his phone. "Because you don't think I'm good enough." That cut me deep. I swallowed hard. "No, because I want you to be better than me." For the first time, he looked up, but instead of understanding, there was this smirk on his face. "Then maybe you should get out of the way." That was the first crack in the foundation of our relationship. The older he got, the more I noticed it. That hunger in his eyes, not for growth, not for the good of the family, but for power, for control. It wasn't ambition anymore. It was entitlement. He started dressing sharper, speaking louder, throwing around phrases like "my company" when talking to outsiders. Each time, I corrected him gently. Our company. Each time, he brushed it off like it was nothing. But to me, it was everything. I kept hoping it was just youth. That time would soften him. But time did the opposite. It sharpened him. At family gatherings, he'd boast about how he was going to modernize everything once I finally retired. People would laugh politely, but I saw the way their eyes darted toward me. Uneasy. Retirement. That word tasted bitter. Because I wasn't done. I wasn't ready to step aside. Not when I had bled to get here. And not when I knew, deep down, that if I handed it all over too soon, he'd burn it to the ground. Still, I tried. God help me, I tried. I gave him more responsibility, a division of his own to manage. I thought maybe if he carried the weight himself, he'd understand the burden. Instead, he used it to feed his ego. Expensive dinners charged to the company card. Lavish marketing campaigns that looked flashy but delivered little. And every mistake, every dollar lost, he spun as someone else's fault. When I confronted him, he sneered, "You don't get it. You're out of touch. Let me run things my way." And there it was again, that word. My. You want to know the cruelest part? I wasn't angry yet. I was hurt. Because I remembered the little boy who used to sit on my shoulders at company picnics, waving to the workers like they were his uncles and aunts. The boy who once told me, "Dad, I'm going to be just like you when I grow up." Where had that boy gone? But denial is a dangerous thing. I told myself he was just finding his place, that sooner or later, he'd understand the responsibility that came with the power he craved. I told myself he loved me too much to ever truly betray me. I told myself lies, because the truth was too painful to face. Looking back now, Act I of this story was about me being blind. Blind to the ambition festering in my son. Blind to the cracks forming in the foundation of both our business and our relationship. Blind to the storm that was already brewing. And the storm was coming. It was only a matter of time before it tore everything apart. If Act I was about blindness, Act II was about denial. Because by this point, the signs were there, big, bright, flashing red signs that my son was slipping away from me, from us, from the family business that was supposed to bind us together. But I didn't want to see it, not until it slapped me in the face. It started small, subtle, a missed meeting here, I forgot to tell you there, little cracks that could be brushed off as mistakes. But I knew my son. He wasn't careless. He was calculated. And those little cracks weren't accidents. They were wedges. He was testing boundaries, seeing how far he could push before I snapped. One Monday morning, I walked into the office earlier than usual. The halls were quiet, the cleaning crew just finishing up. When I stepped into the boardroom, I froze. There he was, my son, sitting at the head of the table. My chair, surrounded by 3 of our senior managers. They were huddled close, whispering, papers spread out, contracts I hadn't seen before. I stood in the doorway, unseen for a moment, watching him. He leaned back, smirking, confident, saying, "This is how we'll move forward once Dad steps aside. He won't fight it forever." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I cleared my throat, and the room went dead silent. The managers stiffened, faces pale. My son turned, startled, then quickly masked it with that same arrogant smile. "Dad, didn't expect you this early," he said casually, as if I hadn't just caught him rehearsing my funeral. I walked in slowly, eyes locked on his. "What's all this?" "Just brainstorming," he said smoothly. "Looking at opportunities. Being proactive." I glanced at the papers. Contracts with vendors I didn't recognize. Plans for expansions I hadn't approved. Budgets that bled red ink. Without me. I asked quietly. He shrugged. "Well, you've been busy." I figured it was time I took more initiative. The way he said I instead of we, God, it burned. Later that night, I confronted him in private. "Son, what are you doing? Sneaking around behind my back? Plotting moves without me?" He laughed. Actually laughed. "Dad, you act like I'm your enemy. I'm trying to prepare for the future. For when you're, Not in charge anymore. Not in charge. My voice cracked sharper than I intended. I'm still here. I'm not dead. And as long as I'm here, you don't undermine me. His face hardened, the smirk fading into something colder. You can't hold on forever. Times are changing. The board knows it. The staff knows it. Everyone knows it except you. That was the first time he said it outright, that I was the problem. After that night, I started noticing more. Phone calls he took in hushed tones when he thought I wasn't listening. Emails that somehow never got forwarded to me. Clients who suddenly seemed distant, evasive, like they were being courted elsewhere. And then there was the money. One of our accountants, an old friend, slipped into my office one evening, nervous, eyes darting to the door. "Sir, I don't want to alarm you, but there are unusual transfers. Small amounts now, but consistent, and all authorized by your son." My chest tightened. How small? 5 figures. Each month. 5 figures. Each month. Siphoned out of accounts I had trusted him with. When I asked my son about it, he didn't even deny it. "Relax, Dad. It's reinvestments. You wouldn't understand. You're too old school." Old school. That was his favorite insult. But the truth was clear. He wasn't reinvesting. He was repositioning, shifting resources, building something of his own. I wish I could say I acted then, that I confronted him, cut him off, protected what I'd built. But I didn't. I convinced myself it was a phase, that if I pushed too hard, I'd drive him further away. So I stayed silent. And in that silence, he grew bolder. The whispers started reaching me. A supplier I'd known for 20 years pulled me aside one afternoon. "Your boy's been making promises. Big ones. But he says you're not really in the picture anymore." Not in the picture. The word stung more than I cared to admit. Even some of my employees, people who had been with me since the beginning, started acting differently, quieter around me, more deferential to him. Loyalty was shifting, slowly but unmistakably. There was one night, God, I'll never forget it. I found myself sitting alone in my office at midnight, the building dark except for the glow of my desk lamp. In front of me were 2 photos. One, a black and white picture of me and my wife, young and smiling, standing in front of that first warehouse. The other, a more recent photo of me and my son at a company event, his smile broad, his arms slung around my shoulder. I stared at those photos for hours. The man who built, and the boy who would one day inherit. But between those 2 photos lay a gulf I couldn't cross. The final straw came at a family gathering. It was my birthday of all days. The house was full, relatives and friends buzzing, laughter echoing in the halls. My son stood up to give a toast. Glass in hand, smile wide. "To my father," he began. "The man who built everything we have today." People clapped, cheered. My chest swelled, just for a moment. Then he added, "And the man who will soon enjoy a much-deserved retirement, while I take us boldly into the future." Laughter erupted. Glasses clinked. But I felt the ground crumble beneath me. Because he hadn't asked. He hadn't spoken to me about retirement. He had just declared it, in front of everyone, as if it were fact. I caught his eye across the table. He raised his glass to me with a smirk, like a predator taunting its prey. And in that moment, denial died. This wasn't just ambition. This wasn't youthful arrogance. This was betrayal. My son wasn't waiting for me to hand him the legacy. He was reaching out, greedy fingers ready to rip it from my hands while I was still breathing. And I realized, with a sick twist in my gut, that the battle lines had already been drawn. Act 2 ended not with action, but with realization. The son I had raised, the heir I had dreamed of, had chosen greed over loyalty. And the seeds of betrayal had sprouted into something far darker. The storm I had ignored was no longer distant. It was here, and it was coming for me. I used to think betrayal crept in quietly, that it slithered under doors, whispered in corners, tiptoed in shadows. But when my son finally made his move, it wasn't quiet at all. It was loud, brutal, public, and it cut deeper than I thought possible. It began with a board meeting, just another quarterly session, or so I thought. I walked into that conference room like I had 1,000 times before, coffee in hand, suit pressed, mind already running numbers. The walls were lined with portraits of past milestones. Our first factory, our first international deal, the day we went public. A gallery of triumphs that were supposed to remind everyone of where we came from. But the air felt different that morning. Heavy, charged. My son was already there, of course, seated at my chair at the head of the table. He didn't even move when I entered, just leaned back casually, twirling a pen between his fingers, that smug half-smile plastered on his face. The other board members glanced nervously between us. Some avoided my gaze entirely. I stopped at the end of the table. "You're in my seat." He smirked. "Not today, Dad." Something cold tightened in my stomach. The meeting started with the usual formalities, financial reports, growth strategies, market projections, but I barely heard them. My focus was on the papers stacked neatly in front of my son. He kept tapping them with his pen, like a man waiting for his cue. And then he got it. "Gentlemen," he said smoothly, standing up, voice confident, "I think it's time we address the future of this company." All eyes turned to him. He spread his hands dramatically, like some damn politician. "We've all seen the numbers. Growth has slowed. Our competitors are moving faster, innovating more aggressively. And while I respect my father's vision, it's clear to me, and I think to many of you, that the old ways aren't enough anymore." A murmur rippled through the room. I felt heat rising in my chest. "Careful," I said quietly, but he ignored me. "It's time for new leadership," he continued, voice rising. "Leadership that understands modern markets, modern technology, modern demands. With all due respect, my father has given everything to this company. But the future doesn't belong to the past. It belongs to me." The words hit like gunfire. I slammed my fist on the table. "Enough. This is not your circus. Not yet." He turned to me slowly, eyes cold. "Dad, it hasn't been yours for a while. You just don't see it." The room was tense, electric. I could see some board members shifting uncomfortably, others staring at the table. A few even nodded along with him. And then, like a dagger in the back, one of them, Paul, a man I trusted for decades, cleared his throat. Perhaps your son has a point. The markets are changing. Maybe it is time for a transition." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A transition? Behind my back? After everything I've built? My son didn't flinch, didn't blink. He pulled a folder from his stack and slid it across the table toward the board. "Here," he said, "a proposal for restructuring. With me as CEO." The blood drained from my face. I grabbed the folder and flipped it open. My hands shook as I scanned the pages. It was all there. Detailed, polished, ruthless. Plans to downsize divisions I'd fought tooth and nail to protect. Partnerships with investors I'd never approved. Even staff realignments. Names of employees I'd known for years, marked for release like they were disposable. And at the bottom, in bold letters, "Proposed leadership transition, effective immediately." My voice cracked with fury. "You planned this. Behind my back. With them." He looked me dead in the eye. "I didn't have to, Dad. They came to me. Because they know I'm ready. And they know you're not." It felt surreal. Like watching a play where everyone had rehearsed their lines except me. I turned to the others, desperate. "Is this what you want? To betray me? To throw away decades of loyalty for his empty promises?" Silence. Avoided eyes. Shuffling papers. And then my son delivered the final blow. He pulled out a document with signatures, more than half the board. "Enough for a majority vote. We've already decided," he said calmly. "Today, the leadership changes." My heart sank. The room blurred. I heard the words, but they felt muffled, distant, like I was underwater. I saw lips moving, hands raised in a vote. My own legacy, stolen from me by the boy I had raised. When it was done, he turned to me, smiling faintly. Not the smile of a son, the smile of a conqueror. It's not personal, Dad. It's just business. That line, that cold, rehearsed line, straight out of a gangster movie. I wanted to tear the room apart. I wanted to scream, to flip the table, to shake sense into him. But instead, I sat there, silent, because rage wasn't what I felt most. It was grief. After the meeting, I confronted him in the hallway. "You think you've won," I spat, my voice trembling. "But you don't even know what you've done. You betrayed your family, your blood, your own father." He shrugged, unfazed. "Maybe, but I've secured the future. And one day, you'll thank me." I stepped closer, my face inches from his. "No. One day, you'll regret this. Because the empire you think you've stolen, it was never built on money or power. It was built on loyalty. And you don't have any." For the first time, his expression faltered, just for a second. But then the mask slipped back into place, and he walked away, leaving me standing in the hallway like a relic. That night, I went home and sat in my study in the dark, a glass of whiskey in my hand, untouched. The house was quiet, but my mind roared. Memories flooded back. The late nights, the sacrifices, the missed birthdays. Also, I could build something for him. And now he had torn it all down. But as I sat there, staring into the shadows, something hardened inside me. He thought it was over. He thought he had won. But he had forgotten one thing. I was the one who built this empire, and I knew every weakness in its walls. And if my son won a war, he would get it. Betrayal is a strange teacher. At first, it blinds you with pain. Then it fuels you with rage. But eventually, if you can survive the storm, it sharpens you into something colder, harder, more dangerous. That's where I was now. For 2 weeks after the takeover, I said nothing. No press statements. No angry emails. No appeals to the board. I let my son bask in his victory. He strutted through those offices like a king. He rearranged teams, signed flashy new deals, and called himself a visionary at shareholder meetings. But I knew the truth. He wasn't building. He was burning. And soon enough, the flames would consume him. Because unlike him, I hadn't just built a company. I'd built a network. Quiet loyalties, old debts, hidden alliances. And now, they were mine to awaken. It started small. I called in favors from journalists I'd once given exclusives to. Off the record, I'd say, "Have you looked closely at the new CEO's partnerships?" A week later, whispers appeared in trade papers. Concerns over aggressive restructuring. Is new leadership too reckless? I leaked documents. Nothing catastrophic, just enough to seed doubt. Old photos of him at wild parties. Emails showing carelessness with client accounts. I didn't need to destroy him. Not yet. I just needed to plant seeds of distrust. And I watered those seeds with precision. Then, I turned to the people who mattered most. The ones who had built this empire alongside me. Men and women who had given 30, 40 years to the company. People my son dismissed as outdated relics. I met them in quiet bars, in back offices, in living rooms. I looked them in the eye and said, "I know he betrayed me. But worse, he betrayed you. And when he falls, I'll need you with me." One by one, they nodded. Some shook my hand firmly. Others hugged me with tears in their eyes. They remembered who had given them a chance when no one else would. And they swore loyalty. Of course, war can't stay hidden forever. One night, he came to my house. No warning, just barged in like he still owned the place. He found me in the study, surrounded by old files. "You're behind this," he snapped. "The leaks. The stories. Don't play dumb." I sipped my whiskey slowly, meeting his eyes with calm steel. "I don't need to play dumb, son. You're doing a fine job destroying yourself without my help." His jaw tightened. "You think you can scare me with your little games? I'm in control now. This company listens to me, not you." I leaned forward, voice low and cold. Control isn't about titles. Control is about loyalty. And the only loyalty you've bought is shallow, and temporary. When things get hard, they'll abandon you. Just like you abandoned me. For the first time, I saw uncertainty flash across his face. He tried to cover it with arrogance. You're old. Out of touch. I'm the future. I chuckled darkly. No, you're just a storm. Loud. Violent. But storms always pass. And when they do, I'll still be here. He stormed out, slamming the door. But I knew I had struck the first crack in his armor. The real strike came weeks later. I knew his weakness, greed. He craved fast success, flashy numbers, the appearance of brilliance. So I dangled bait. Through intermediaries, I set up a too-good-to-be-true partnership offer. A foreign investor with deep pockets, promising exponential growth if my son pushed through aggressive expansions. He didn't hesitate. He signed everything without due diligence, eager to parade his genius in front of the board. But what he didn't know, the investor was a shell, and the contracts were laced with clauses that would implode under scrutiny. It was all legal, all clean, and when it collapsed, as I knew it would, the blame would fall squarely on him. The collapse was brutal. News broke. New CEO's risky deal backfires. Millions lost in failed expansion. Shareholders panicked. Stocks dipped. Clients threatened to pull contracts. Suddenly, the golden boy wasn't a visionary. He was reckless, dangerous, unfit. The board convened an emergency meeting. This time, I didn't storm in uninvited. I waited. I let the chaos reach its peak. And when they called me, desperate, I walked back into that boardroom. Not as a broken relic, but as the man who had predicted it all. I stood at the head of the table, where I belonged. You wanted him, I said quietly, almost pitying, and he gave you ruin. But if you want salvation, you know who can provide it. My son sat there, pale, sweating, trying to defend himself. It was a minor setback. I cut him off. A setback? You cost this company millions. You endangered everything we built. And for what? Ego. He slammed his fist down. You set me up. I leaned forward, voice razor sharp. No, you set yourself up. Because you were so blinded by ambition, so desperate to steal what wasn't yours, you walked straight into the trap. That's not my fault. That's your weakness. The room was silent. Every word I spoke was a nail in his coffin. Finally, the chairman cleared his throat. We need a vote. And just like that, the empire was mine again. After the meeting, I found him alone in the parking garage. He sat slumped against his car, staring at the ground. For the first time in months, he didn't look like a conqueror. He looked like a boy. My boy. Why, Dad, he whispered. Why couldn't you just let me have it? I stood there, torn between rage and sorrow. Because you didn't earn it, I said softly. And until you learn what loyalty means, you never will. He looked up at me, eyes red with fury and shame. You think you've won, but this isn't over. I shook my head. No, son. For you, it's just beginning. The hardest lesson of your life. And I walked away, leaving him in the shadows of the empire he had tried and failed to steal. Revenge isn't always about destroying someone. Sometimes it's about showing them the mirror, showing them the wreckage of their own choices. My son thought betrayal would crown him king. Instead, it stripped him bare. And me? I didn't just take back my throne. I reminded everyone, including him, why it was mine to begin with. Victory tastes different when it's soaked in blood. Not literal blood, though some nights it felt close, but the kind of blood that binds a father to his son. I had my empire back. The board reinstated me. Shareholders sighed with relief, and the press hailed me as the wise old lion who saved the company from disaster. But in the quiet moments, when the noise of applause faded, all I could hear was the silence of my family tearing apart. My wife tried to keep things normal. She'd set the table for 4 out of habit, but my son's chair stayed empty. He refused to come around, refused to answer calls. When he did speak to his mother, his voice was clipped, cold, dripping with resentment. You chose him, he said once. You always choose him. And though she tried to argue, try to bridge the gap, I could hear the truth beneath it. He wasn't just angry at me. He felt abandoned by her too. That's what betrayal does. It poisons everything, until even love feels like a lie. The business survived, but it wasn't the same. Investors returned, clients stabilized, employees breathed easier. But there was a heaviness in the halls now. Whispers follow me everywhere. The son tried to overthrow him, a family civil war. Every smile felt forced. Every handshake tinged with curiosity, like they were waiting to see if my heir would strike again. Legacy wasn't about money anymore. It was about the story. And ours had become a tragedy. I kept tabs on him quietly. He tried starting his own company, but the reputation damage was too severe. Investors laughed him out of meetings. Old contacts slammed doors in his face. He burned through money fast, chasing deals that went nowhere. The worst part, I recognized the look in his eyes in the photos I saw online. The same look I once had as a young man. Hungry, desperate, willing to bleed for a chance. But where I had built slowly, brick by brick, he won a tower instantly. And so it all crumbled. Months later, he came back. Not to reconcile, but to lash out one last time. He cornered me outside the office, voice trembling with fury. "You ruined me," he hissed. "You couldn't just step aside. You had to destroy me." I looked him straight in the eye. "No, son, I didn't ruin you. I protected what we built. You destroyed yourself because you cared more about power than family." He laughed bitterly, a broken sound. "You think you've won? You've lost me forever. That's your victory." And he walked away. This time, I didn't follow, because some battles leave scars too deep for mending. In the end, revenge gave me back the business. But it cost me my son, and maybe that was the true punishment, far harsher than anything I could have planned, because I still love him. Even after all of it, I love him. But love doesn't erase betrayal. It just makes it hurt more. So if you're listening, maybe you're thinking, did I win? Yes. And no. I saved the company. I proved I was still the lion. But I lost my cub in the process. And sometimes when I sit alone in the office late at night, surrounded by the empire I fought so hard to protect, I wonder if the price was worth it. Revenge feels good in the moment, but family scars last a lifetime. So tell me, what would you have done in my place? If you made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real tales of betrayal and revenge. And maybe learn from mine.